The silver balloons spelling out 25 bobbed against the ceiling of the country club's main ballroom, catching the light from the crystal chandeliers my parents had insisted on renting for their anniversary celebration. 200 guests filled the elegantly decorated space, all dressed in their finest evening wear, celebrating Richard and Patricia Hoffman's quarter-century of marriage. I stood near the back of the room in my simple navy dress, watching my family perform their usual theater of success. My older brother Marcus commanded the center of attention near the bar, regaling guests with stories of his latest promotion at the investment firm. My sister Jennifer held court by the dance floor, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she gestured dramatically about her husband's medical practice and their upcoming vacation to Italy. Meanwhile, I nursed a glass of sparkling water and tried to blend into the expensive wallpaper. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been strategically invisible for the past 3 years, letting my family believe I was struggling with my little real estate hobby, while they built their impressive careers. What they didn't know was that I owned the building this country club was in. I owned the office building where Marcus worked. I owned the medical plaza where Jennifer's husband practiced. I owned 37 properties across the city, including the house my parents had been living in for the past 2 years. But tonight wasn't about business. Tonight was about watching my family celebrate a love story while treating one of their own children like an embarrassment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus called out, tapping his champagne flute with a silver knife, "if I could have everyone's attention for a toast." The room quieted as 200 guests turned toward my brother, who stood with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. 25 years ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the room, Richard and Patricia Hoffman made a commitment to build something beautiful together. They've created not just a marriage but a family, a legacy, a testament to what's possible when two people share the same values and vision for success. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Dad beamed, his arm around Mom's waist as they stood near the head table draped in white silk and adorned with centerpieces that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "They raised 3 children," Marcus continued, and I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach. 3 children who have gone on to embody the values they instilled in us. Hard work, ambition, and the drive to excel in everything we do. Jennifer smiled radiantly from her position near the dance floor, her husband Dr. Kevin Morrison nodding approvingly beside her. The guests murmured their agreement, clearly impressed by the successful offspring of the happy couple. Marcus graduated summa cum laude from Wharton and now manages over $500 million in assets at Goldman Sachs, Marcus said, speaking about himself in the third person with the kind of confidence that only comes from never being wrong. Jennifer married one of the city's most respected cardiologists and has become a pillar of our community through her charity work. More applause. More validation of the family success story. And then there's... Marcus paused, his eyes scanning the room until they found me lurking near the back. The smile on his face didn't waver, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "There's our sister Emma, who is still figuring things out." The polite laughter that followed felt like acid in my veins. 200 successful people chuckling at the family disappointment who couldn't get her act together by age 27. "But that's okay," Marcus continued with mock generosity, "because Mom and Dad have enough success for all of us. They've built the Hoffman name into something that matters in this community. They've created a legacy that Jennifer and I are proud to carry forward." The message was clear. The family legacy would continue through the successful children while the failure would be politely ignored. I took a sip of my sparkling water and checked my phone. A text from my property manager. "Hoffman residence rent is 3 days late. Should I proceed with standard collection procedures?" I typed back quickly, "Give them 2 more weeks." It wasn't the first time my parents had been late with rent. Their lifestyle had always exceeded their income, but they'd gotten increasingly careless over the past year. Dad's small accounting firm was losing clients to larger companies with better technology, and Mom's interior design business depended on referrals from friends who were starting to tighten their own budgets. But they kept spending like nothing had changed. The country club membership. The luxury cars. The expensive clothes and jewelry. The elaborate anniversary party that probably cost $30,000 they didn't have. I knew because I'd been quietly managing their financial crisis for 2 years, ever since I'd purchased their house when they defaulted on their mortgage. They thought they were renting from a management company called Harbor Properties, They had no idea Harbor Properties was wholly owned by Emma Hoffman, the daughter they considered a failure. "So let's raise our glasses," Marcus concluded his toast, "to Richard and Patricia Hoffman, and to the next 25 years of success, love and family." "Cheers," the room chorused, crystal clinking against crystal in a symphony of celebration. I didn't raise my glass. After dinner, the real performance began. Dad worked the room like a politician, sharing stories of his business success and dropping hints about major deals in the pipeline. Mom held court near the dessert table, discussing their upcoming kitchen renovation and the European vacation they were planning for their actual anniversary date next month. All lies, of course. Dad's business was hemorrhaging money. Mom hadn't booked a paying client in 6 months. The kitchen renovation would have to wait until they figured out how to pay their existing bills. And the European vacation existed only in their imagination. But nobody questioned the facade. These were successful people surrounded by other successful people, and questioning someone's prosperity would be terribly gauche. I was standing near the windows overlooking the golf course when Jennifer approached, her smile as brilliant and sharp as her diamond earrings. "Emma, there you are. I've been looking for you all evening," she lied smoothly. "Pooh, it's nice. Is that dress new?" "Thank you," I said simply. The dress had cost $89 at a department store, but it fit well and looked appropriate for the occasion. "So tell me," Jennifer continued, settling into what I recognized as her concerned older sister voice, "how are things going with your real estate thing? Are you still pursuing that?" The way she said, "pursuing," made it sound like I was chasing butterflies in a field rather than running a multi-million-dollar property empire. "It's going well," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "That's wonderful to hear. Kevin and I were just talking about how important it is to have hobbies. He's been encouraging me to get back into painting now that the children are older." She paused delicately. "Of course, we're fortunate that his practice is successful enough that I can pursue creative interests without worrying about, income." The implication was clear. Real estate was my cute hobby because I couldn't find a real career. "Actually," I said, taking another sip of sparkling water, "I closed on my 37th property last week. A medical plaza downtown." Jennifer's smile flickered for just a moment. 37? That seems like a lot. Are you sure you're not overextending yourself? Real estate can be so risky, especially for someone without much experience in business. I could have told her that the medical plaza I just purchased was worth $2.8 million. I could have mentioned that my total property portfolio was valued at just over $47 million. I could have explained that I'd been studying real estate investment strategies since college and had spent 2 years working 18-hour days to build my business while they thought I was failing at life. That I just nodded. "I'll be careful." "Good. We just worry about you, Mom and Dad put so much pressure on themselves to be successful, and they want the same thing for all of us. It would break their hearts if they thought you were struggling." The irony was breathtaking. Mom and Dad were struggling, catastrophically, while their failure daughter was the only thing keeping them from bankruptcy. But Jennifer's concern wasn't really about my welfare. It was about maintaining the family image. "I understand," I said. Jennifer squeezed my arm with practiced sympathy. "I'm glad we had this talk. We all love you, right? Even if you don't always fit the traditional mold of success." She drifted away to rejoin her husband, leaving me alone with the weight of their conditional love. The evening continued with dancing and more toasts and the kind of elaborate celebration that looked perfect in photos but felt hollow in person. I watched my parents glow under the attention, accepting congratulations on their beautiful marriage and successful family while their youngest daughter stood invisible in the back of the room. Around 11 p.m., as guests began to drift toward the exits, Dad approached me with the purposeful stride of someone who had been building up to a difficult conversation all evening. "Emma," he said, his voice carrying the authority that had served him well in his accounting practice, "I think we need to have a talk." Mom appeared beside him, her face set in the expression she wore when delivering difficult truths. Marcus and Jennifer materialized from different corners of the room, forming a semicircle around me near the windows. "This was supposed to be a celebration of our marriage," Dad continued, "but I can't ignore the elephant in the room anymore." My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. "What elephant is that, Dad?" "You," Marcus said bluntly. "You're the elephant, Emma. You're 27 years old with no real career, No meaningful relationships, no direction in life. You show up to family events like this and just lurk in the corner, making everyone uncomfortable. I wasn't lurking, I said quietly. I was attending your anniversary party. Barely, Jennifer added. You didn't talk to anyone, didn't participate in the toasts, didn't even congratulate Mom and Dad properly. You just stood there like you'd rather be anywhere else. Maybe because I would rather be anywhere else, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The circle of family members went still. 200 guests were still milling around the ballroom, but our little corner had become its own bubble of tension. Excuse me. Mom's voice was dangerously quiet. I said maybe I'd rather be anywhere else. This whole evening has been about celebrating your success while making sure everyone knows I don't measure up. Marcus literally toasted to the family legacy continuing through him and Jennifer while describing me as someone who's still figuring things out. Why would I want to be here for that? Dad's face flushed red. Because you're part of this family, Emma. And part of being in a family means supporting each other, even when one member isn't pulling their weight. Not pulling my weight? The words came out sharper than I intended. What exactly do you think I should be pulling? Your weight. Marcus exploded. Your share of the family reputation. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have people ask about my sister and have to explain that she's playing around with real estate while living in some tiny apartment and driving a car that's older than some of the interns at my firm? Maybe you should stop being embarrassed by who I am and start focusing on who you are, I said, my voice remaining calm despite the fury building in my chest. Who I am? Marcus laughed bitterly. I'm a managing director at one of the most prestigious investment firms in the country. I make more money in a year than most people see in a decade. I'm married to a successful attorney and we're about to close on a $2.3 million house in the best neighborhood in the city. That's who I am, Emma. That's what success looks like. I could have told him that his $2.3 million house was in a development I owned. I could have mentioned that his prestigious firm was headquartered in one of my office buildings. I could have explained that his annual salary, impressive as it was, represented about 2 months of my passive rental income. That I just nodded. That's impressive, Marcus. I'm happy for you. My calm response seemed to infuriate him even more. Are you really happy for me? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you resent anyone in this family who's actually succeeded. I don't resent your success, I said honestly. I resent being treated like a failure because my success doesn't look like yours. What success? Jennifer's voice rose to nearly a shriek. What success are you talking about, Emma? Your real estate hobby? Your tiny apartment? Your ancient car? What part of your life represents success to you? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with 27 years of family dynamics and expectations. This was my moment to defend myself, to reveal the truth, to show them exactly how wrong they'd been about everything. My success, I said carefully, doesn't require your validation. It was the wrong answer. Dad's face went from red to purple. Your success doesn't require our validation? Emma, you're living like a college student at 27 years old. You have no career, no prospects, no plan for the future. You show up to family events and contribute nothing to the conversation because you have nothing to contribute. And now you're standing here acting like we're the problem. I never said you were the problem. You didn't have to say it. Mom's voice cracked with emotion. It's written all over your face every time you look at us. Judgment. Resentment. Like we've somehow failed you instead of the other way around. The words hit like physical blows. Around us, the remaining party guests were beginning to notice the family drama unfolding near the windows. We have given you everything, Dad continued, his voice building to a crescendo. Education, support, love, encouragement. We've watched you waste every opportunity, squander every advantage, and refuse every piece of advice we've tried to give you. And now you have the audacity to stand here on our anniversary and act like you're somehow better than the rest of us. I never said I was better than anyone. You don't have to say it. Marcus jumped back in. It's in your attitude, Emma. This superiority complex you've developed about your alternative lifestyle or whatever you want to call it. Like you're too good for conventional success. Too enlightened to care about money or achievement or contributing something meaningful to the world. The irony was staggering. My family was lecturing me about contributing to the world while living off my secret financial support. Well, I'm done with it, Dad declared, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Several guests turned to stare openly. I'm done enabling this fantasy that you can drift through life without consequences. I'm done pretending that your choices don't reflect on this family. Mom stepped closer, her voice shaking with emotion. Don't come home again, Emma. Don't come to family dinners, don't come to holidays, don't come to celebrations. You clearly don't want to be part of this family, so don't be part of it. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Around us, the party had essentially stopped as guests strained to hear the family meltdown. Don't come home again, Dad repeated, his voice carrying the finality of a judge passing sentence. You're a disappointment, Emma. To us, to yourself, to everyone who ever believed you could be something more than this. I'm tired of watching you fail, and I'm tired of making excuses for you. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Jennifer stood slightly behind my parents, their faces showing satisfaction mixed with discomfort. They'd gotten what they wanted. The problem child officially excommunicated from the family, but even they seemed surprised by the brutality of Dad's words. I looked around the circle of faces that had shaped my entire life. The people who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and celebrated my graduation from college. The people who had just disowned me in front of 200 witnesses because I didn't meet their definition of success. Okay, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. I understand. Dad blinked, clearly expecting tears or pleas or dramatic protests. Mom frowned, sensing something different in my tone. Marcus and Jennifer exchanged glances, unsure how to interpret my calm acceptance. That's it. Dad demanded. No arguing. No begging us to reconsider. I shook my head. No, Dad. You've made your feelings clear. I'll respect your wishes. I picked up my small purse from the windowsill and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking softly against the marble floors. Behind me, I could hear the family trying to resume normal conversation, attempting to salvage the party atmosphere after the public disownment. As I reached the ballroom doors, I heard Mom calling after me. Emma, wait. But I didn't wait. I walked through the country club lobby, past the expensive artwork and fresh flowers, past the valet stand where my 10-year-old Honda sat among the BMWs and Mercedes. I got in my car and drove home to my modest apartment, where I would spend the rest of the evening reviewing property reports and preparing for tomorrow's business meetings. Because that's what Emma Hoffman, the family disappointment, did with her evenings. 3 weeks later, I was in my home office reviewing quarterly financial statements when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom, but that was unusual enough to be concerning. My parents hadn't contacted me since the anniversary party. Hello. I answered cautiously. Emma. Mom's voice was thick with tears, shaking with panic. Oh God, Emma, I didn't know who else to call. My stomach clenched. Mom, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Is Dad okay? We're being evicted. The words came out in a rush, followed by a sob that sounded like it came from somewhere deep and broken. The landlord is throwing us out. We have 3 days to pack our things and leave. I set down my coffee cup carefully, buying myself a moment to process what I was hearing. Evicted? Why? We're behind on rent, Mom whispered, her voice barely audible. 3 months behind. Dad's business. It's not doing well. We've been trying to catch up, but every time we get close, something else happens. The car repair, the medical bills, the taxes. She broke down completely, sobbing into the phone with the kind of desperation that only comes from facing complete financial ruin. Mom, I said gently, where are you going to go? I don't know. Her voice was small, defeated. We've called everyone we know. Marcus says he can't help because he's closing on his house and doesn't have liquid assets. Jennifer says their guest room is too small for us to stay more than a few days. And Kevin doesn't want long-term house guests. The successful children suddenly unavailable when their parents needed help. Dad won't admit how bad things are, Mom continued through her tears. He keeps saying he'll figure something out, that this is just temporary, but Emma, I'm scared. I'm 52 years old and I'm scared we're going to be homeless. The woman who had disowned me 3 weeks ago was calling me in her moment of absolute desperation. The irony was breathtaking. How much do you owe? I asked. $12,000. Plus late fees and penalties. Probably closer to 15. He paused, sniffling. I know we don't have the right to ask you for anything after what happened at the party. I know your father said terrible things and I know we've all treated you badly. But I didn't know who else to call. $15,000. Less than I made in a day from my property portfolio. Less than I'd spent on new appliances for one of my rental properties last month. Emma. Mom's voice was tentative, fragile. Are you there? I'm here. Can you help us? I know you don't have much, but if you could loan us even a few $1,000s, it might buy us some time to figure out a plan. I closed my eyes, processing the magnitude of this conversation. My parents thought they were renting from Harbor Properties, a faceless management company. They had no idea their youngest daughter owned their house, had been their landlord for 2 years, had been quietly extending their payment deadlines and waiving late fees to keep them housed while they built their facade of success. They had no idea their family failure had been the only thing standing between them and homelessness. Mom, I said carefully, let me ask you something. If I help you with this, what changes? Dad's business is still struggling. Your client base is still shrinking. You're still spending money you don't have on maintaining appearances. What happens when you fall behind again next month? The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I don't know, she whispered finally. I don't know how to fix this, Emma. I don't know how to tell your father that we can't afford the life we've built. I don't know how to admit to our friends that we're not as successful as we pretend to be. I don't know how to start over at 52. For the first time in years, my mother was telling me the truth. What about Marcus and Jennifer? I asked. Have you told them how serious the situation is? I tried. Her voice became bitter. Marcus says real estate is illiquid and all his money is tied up in investments. Jennifer says they're saving for their children's college funds and can't spare anything significant. They both suggested we downsize our lifestyle, maybe find a smaller place to rent. The successful children offering advice instead of assistance. They're right about downsizing, I said. I know. Mom's voice cracked again. I know they're right. But your father. He's built his whole identity around providing for this family, around being successful. The thought of admitting failure, of moving to some tiny apartment and giving up everything we've worked for, it's killing him. I understood that feeling more than she knew. Mom, I said, I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. 3 weeks ago, you and Dad told me I was a disappointment and banned me from the family. You said I was embarrassing and that my choices reflected poorly on everyone. Do you remember that? The silence was so long I wondered if she'd hung up. Yes, she whispered finally. I remember. So why are you calling me now? If I'm such a disappointment, such an embarrassment, why am I the person you turn to when you need help? Another long pause. Because, Mom said, her voice barely audible, you're the only one who answered the phone. The simplicity of that statement hit me like a physical blow. Marcus was too busy with his important job and expensive house. Jennifer was too concerned with her social status and perfect life. But Emma, the family failure, was available when her parents needed her most. Mom, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, I said, my voice steady and clear. Okay. Harbor Properties, your landlord company? I own it. I bought your house 2 years ago when you defaulted on your mortgage. I've been your landlord for 2 years, extending your payment deadlines, waiving late fees, and covering the maintenance costs when you couldn't afford them. The silence on the other end of the line was complete. You've been 3 months behind on rent because I've been letting you stay 3 months behind on rent. The eviction notice came because my property manager follows standard procedures, but I've been overriding them to keep you housed. Still nothing. Mom? Are you there? Her voice was so small I could barely hear it. I don't understand. Your disappointment daughter, the one who's supposedly a failure, has been keeping you from being homeless for 2 years. The family embarrassment owns 37 properties across the city worth approximately $47 million. The daughter with no real career has been financially supporting her parents while they publicly humiliated her for not being successful enough. The sound Mom made wasn't quite a gasp and wasn't quite a sob. The eviction notice you received? I continued. It's real. Harbor Properties is evicting you for non-payment of rent. And as the owner of Harbor Properties, I have decided not to override that eviction. Emma, please. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my modest apartment, surrounded by the quarterly reports of my real estate empire. Outside my window, the city sparkled with lights from buildings I owned, apartments I managed, businesses I'd helped establish. My phone rang again immediately. Then again. Then again. I turned it off and went back to reviewing my financial statements. The next morning I would wake up to 43 missed calls and 17 voicemails from my family. I would listen to Dad's voice crack as he begged me to reconsider. I would hear Marcus offer to pay me back with interest. I would hear Jennifer promise that things would be different, that they'd treat me with respect, that they understood now how wrong they'd been. But that morning was still 12 hours away. Tonight I was finally free to be exactly who I was. Emma Hoffman, successful businesswoman, property owner, and former disappointment to a family that had never bothered to see her clearly. And I was completely, utterly at peace with that.